can even compare, two moments of time in the same culture, right? So notions of femininity in the United States in the 1950s versus the 2000s, right? So what it meant to be a woman, what it meant to be feminine was very different than it is now. You can even see this in certain artifacts of cultures. Like if you compare the action figures from a long time ago to the action figures that kids play with today, you'll notice that the size of their muscles has like grown over time, right? So the idea of a strong masculine man would have been associated with smaller muscle size, right? They wouldn't need to be considered so large in order to be considered strong. Whereas now, right, we need like crazy over the top, CGI'd muscles to convey that type of strength. So again, maybe we can think of lots of different examples, and all this means is that gender is something that can be different than what one's biological sex is, right? And this is important to understand because a lot of individuals who fall outside of the sex and gender binary are often judged with normative terminology, right, to say that they are less than, right, what we consider to be quote-unquote normal, natural, or right? So it ends up being used as a criticism of them if they don't fall within those strict views, and so that's why we want to broaden our view. Okay, so that leads us into the first bit of what we're going to be focusing on today, and that is to give you a history of the different theories that have been used to explain sex and gender. Now, what these really are four main categories of theories, because there are lots of individual theories. Again, I'll talk about those in the comparison chart, but just so you get a sense of what these ideas are and how they're supposed to be used. What we mean by a sex or gender theory is the same way we use theory in science, right? So this is a way to describe, predict, and explain relationships, right? So we don't just want a theory that describes reality as it currently is, right? Because as we just discussed, some of these things change. And so we also want a good theory is going to be one that can predict what those concepts will mean in the future, right? So if one theory has a view of gender that was strictly tied to biology, right, that wouldn't have been predictive of the way we use the concept gender today, right? So that would not be a preferable theory, for example. And then again, how it's going to explain relationships in this case, not between like people, but how are the concepts of sex, gender, and as we'll also see, sexuality, perhaps related to one another, right? So for instance, you're going to see a lot of discussion of whether or not there is a causal relationship between sex, gender, and sexuality, right? Does one of them cause the other characteristics? And if there is a causal relationship, what direction does it go, right? Sort of a chicken and egg, which came first type of situation.